Welcome to Piggy Power. This is a general tips and how-to on changing a ball joint. A ball joint is literally what it sounds like. It's a joint with a ball inside with grease sealed in to allow the suspension to move up and down without binding and maintaining its geometry. They do wear out over time. They're man-made. They have grease that goes old, boots split, etc, etc. So it's no surprise you might have to replace one at some point. Now, many different types of ball joints on different types of arms. We're doing a lower ball joint on the Wishbone on a Peugeot 306. I'll talk about the different types briefly as we go through. This is just a general guide for some top tips. The joint itself, you notice I've got a Delphi one here. I always recommend, if you can spend a few more pounds, that's all it is, on a premium make, it's more worthwhile. It'll likely come with better hardware, the joint itself will be better, it'll also fit better and last better. Why spend a couple of hours trying to get a ball joint changed if only in a few weeks it will fail again because it's a cheap part? Fit once and it's done in it. Some recommended tools for this sort of job: some WD-40 and a wire brush or a wire wheel on something. Once you've got the vehicle safe, I'm not going to talk about that, but safe and the wheel off, you'll find that you'll need a certain tools. I need a 17 and a 16, so get them prepared and ready rather than shuffling through your box. A lever is always good, and a strike through lever is handy so you can hit it with a hammer. If you haven't got that, that's okay. Ball joint splitters are an ideal thing, but if you're here to know how to just drop the ball joint, then these are a bad idea because they tend to split the boots here, because they go through here like that. So that's a bad thing because you're going to have to change the ball joint. This is what I call just my blunt metal chisel. This, as you'll see later, will split open the joint to help us release the ball joint. A hammer, of course, is useful, and a lever bar. The bigger, the longer, the stronger, the better, in my opinion, for this job. A light is always handy, and a jack, which you're going to already have, to help us raise and lower suspension, put pressure in certain points if necessary. Let's get you closer up. So your wishbone here is connected to the vehicle with the 2 points over there on the chassis, comes forward underneath your hub with which your brakes and your wheel are connected to, and here is your ball joint in here with the boot and the pin coming up from the ball joint. Now there's a bolt that runs through here. That squeezes the bottom of the hub, which has a split just there, and squeezes it onto it. We call that a pinch bolt. It's connected to the wishbone via 3 bolts. That's most common, 3 bolts. It makes kind of sense, really, doesn't it, when you think about it? So there's our 3 bolts, 1, 2, 3. Now in some cases these will be rivets. All you have to do with the rivets is grind the bottom of the rivet off and punch them through and refit with bolts. As you just saw, your new one will come with new bolts. So as you can see there, it looks like 3 nuts or bolts that have been rounded off. That's the rivets. You'll need to grind them off and then use a punch to knock them out. Once you've done that, you can replace them with the bolts once you've replaced your joint. Some ball joints are what I call inverted. So instead of the ball joint being on the arm, the ball joint is actually in the hub and goes through the arm. This means to disconnect the arm, you just have to undo a bolt under here, get a lever across and knock it down like I will in a second with this one. You'll then likely need a special tool or use a punch to undo the ball joint from the hub. It'll unscrew, you screw your new one in with the punch knocking it around as you go, and then refit the arm. Now other occasions your ball joint will actually be fixed permanently to your lower arm. This means you're going to have to remove your lower arm by removing the bolt in there and a bolt or 2 at the back holding the other bush. The whole arm will be removed and you'll fit your whole arm in one go with new joints. This type of ball joint, the first thing we're going to do is remove this pinch bolt. Hold this side of the bolt, the head, with a spanner and take the nut off the other side with your socket. With the nut off the pinch bolt, you may find the pinch bolt is a little bit tight and won't come out easily. There's a couple of things you can do about that. One, you can turn the bolt using a spanner or a socket. That helps free it off. Pour a bit of WD-40 in there. You could also smack, obviously, this side with a hammer. If you're going to do that, one of 2 things: a copper hammer, and the other thing is you want to reuse this pinch bolt. So usually you put the nut back on, a few threads, and then give it a smack. That way you don't damage the threads on the pinch bolt as you do it. Also that way, if you haven't got a copper hammer, which won't damage the threads, then you're okay, you're safe. So let's just tap that bolt out, shall we? There it is, and one good smack. Just make it free. Yep, that's free. You then take the nut off. We should be able to push that through and pull it out the other side. There we go. So we'll put that aside for use later on. The next thing we're going to do to get access to this is turn the steering to the right, if you're on the right hand side of the car, or to the left hand side, whichever gives you access. On some vehicles I would recommend removing the brake caliper. This does give you a little bit more access, and if you do this, there's two big bolts on the back of the carrier, and then hang your caliper and the carrier up here somewhere with a cable tie around your suspension. This way you're not straining at the brake hose. That'll give you a little bit more access around the back. So now with the steering wheel turned, we can get in there nicely. Now what we're going to do is we're going to get our little splitter, our little metal chisel, and we're going to fit it in the little gap in there. Our little split in the hub in there. You see that? And you want to get your little splitter in there, give that a little tap to open it out. That'll just basically stop it pinching on the ball joint and make it easier when we lever down the wishbone. You could also use our little lever here, and you do the same thing, you tap it in and just give it a bit of a tug just to open up that joint. Now there's a number of ways now. You could try and put a lever in like that, putting the lever in like that and pushing the hub away from the ball joint and the wishbone, and it's sort of popping down. But to make life easy so I'm not sweating, I'm going to bring my big lever in, I'm going to slide it underneath the joint there, I'm going to go all the way onto something solid on the body of the car. Now this is where two people come in handy, one pushing down on the lever and one pushing the hub in. Because of the position the ball joint sits on the hub, at the angle when the suspension is dropped, it means that it's always trying to push against itself. So as you push down, it's trying to push out. So push the hub in while you push down on the wishbone. And there it goes. If it's front wheel drive, likelihood is you've got drive shafts here. That's another reason for pushing in. The wishbone drops out, the hub pulls out, and it might pull your drive shaft out of the gearbox, which means a dribbling gearbox oil everywhere, which isn't much fun. So keep the pressure in on the hub while you push your wishbone down. With the inverted joint, which sits like this, with the joint coming down and the wishbone attaches to it, you'll find that the ball joint actually has a thread coming on the end of it with a nut on it. If you struggle to get the wishbone off this, a good idea is to put the nut back on to protect the threads, and then put a jack underneath and jack up on that thread, will be the bolt and the nut. This way you're taking the pressure, taking the hub up, and you can leave it down on the wishbone. Often wishbones get to a certain point and there's no more movement in them, so you just can't keep pushing down because they're at their max movement. So if you raise the hub slightly with a jack, that allows you to push further down on the wishbone and pop it off. Once there's movement in there, you want to do the nut and you can pull the wishbone down all the way. This is going to represent our wishbone here, coming off. I know this is a trap rod end, but that's our wishbone. And some wishbones obviously have the joint on them, but they also, instead of having a pinch bolt that holds the hub tight on it, they go through and they have a nut on the top with a threaded section on the ball joint itself. So you take this nut off, but the arm won't pop down. All you've actually got to do is hit here. Notice actually this part of the hub has this sort of heating post. Hit it very hard with a metal hammer, or a dead weight hammer is even better, but a hard smack right on there, and the shock factor, with a little bit of weight on the joint as well, will knock it down. The same happens if this is an inverted ball joint, so the ball joint is on the hub and going through the wishbone. If you put a bit of weight on the wishbone and smack the wishbone here, then that'll knock it down. If you're reusing the joint, again I always recommend stick the nut on the threads to protect the threads, because if you slip and miss and hit the threads, you've ruined your threads. If your wishbone and ball joint are one, then at this stage you want to remove the bolts and nuts holding your wishbone in, pull your wishbone out, push your new one in. We have 3 bolts to do here, so we're going to give them a rub down and then remove them, and thus removing our ball joint. Take care in how you move things around here with tools. This is your constant velocity boot. and joint behind it. And if you split this boot, you're going to get grease coming out and you're going to have a new big job on your hands, so try not to do that. Now get your lever in, push the wishbone down and pull your joint out. Not normally, to be honest, that easy just to pull the joint out. You might have to just tap it out with a hammer. Okay, so it's at this stage you just need to compare your joints. So you just put them side by side. Back to back is good. Check that the holes all line up. Check they're the same distance, hole to centre pin. Check the diameters are the same, etc, etc. Which mine are. On some Peugeots there are different diameters. We can notice that possibly the reason for failure on this joint was the boot started splitting and coming apart. Lets water in, lets grease out, and allows the joint to get some movement in it. So we slide the new joint in and do the bolts up. So we'll just push this arm down. We might need to use the lever for that, obviously. And you might just need to very gently tap the joint into place. As you get one bolt lined up, drop it down. Get another bolt lined up and you tap that one down until they all line up. There we go. It just all drop through nicely. Washer on each and a nut on each. The washer allows the nut to turn, which is why we do the nut up, not the bolt, and tighten up before binding on the wishbone. What we'll do here is we will buzz them on and then finish them off by hand, hopefully. So I've just turned my gun down, just so that we don't over tighten them. You won't need to put a breaker bar on it or anything like that, they're not that tight. Okay, we're ready to roll. So this can be a bit of a fiddle now, trying to get the ball joint popped back into the hub. It's a reverse process. Weight on the wishbone with the bar, pushing in with the hub. Have a hammer in ready just to lightly tap the ball joint if it's necessary. And the other thing you want to do is manually, if you can, because the ball joint will be tight, push the ball joint into a sort of position where it will be. If it's pointing out like that, it's not going to go in. If it's pointing all the way there, it won't go in. So usually, just off upright, pointing in towards the vehicle, will be the angle in which it wants to sit inside the hub. So lever in, a little bit of weight down, push the hub in. Some joints will have more weight on them than others. Pull the hub into place, keep it pressure in, give a little tap. Now this is quite important, so let's try and show you. Now that slot is where the pinch bolt goes in. It needs to line up with the hole in the hub. There's that slot there. Can you see that? So that needs to line up with the hole in the hub. See a hole in the hub there? So you need to push the ball joint up until the little slot in there, you can see it's actually just fouling at the moment. It needs to go up a little bit higher until it's perfectly in line. Then, when you get your pinch bolt, push it back in. You won't be ruining your threads. So it's not the pinch bolt back in, and we're going to tighten up hand tight. No guns, just hand tight. Tight, but hand tight. Nice and tight. You're good to go. So there we have it. Nice new ball joint. There are a couple of other types of ball joints. I'm afraid it can't cover every single type. I hope it's been helpful in some way in replacing your worn out, tired ball joint. I hope it saves you a little bit of money, and I hope it gets you greasy, because it's fun getting dirty. You feel very satisfied then when you go and have a nice cup of tea, which I suggest you do, like I do now. So thank you for watching. Please support Piggy Power by liking this, by subscribing, by seeing my other videos, and if you'd like, follow my Facebook page and you can even buy some merchandise. Winning!